Alright guys, you are in for a treat today. One of my students here in Mission 1400 Plus, which is the community you can join with the link in the description below, just sent me a full recording of him taking an SAT practice test on the website Onico that we used. He got a 1330 on the test, and this is a video of me giving my full thoughts on everything that I thought he could have done better, and also some of the major problems that he missed and how to solve them as well. Even though this is literally just one student, I definitely noticed a ton of stuff from this practice test that is really applicable for all of you guys, no matter what stage of SAT you're in right now. So I think you guys are going to really like this. Also, something I was thrown for you guys, if you want me to review one of your practice tests as well and do a similar kind of video for it, for the next 30 days, as of the time I'm recording this video, anybody who joins Mission 1400 Plus, even just on the free trial, which you can see here, I'll do it for. You may be wondering, why am I doing this? But honestly, just because, one, it gives me good YouTube content, two, it'll help you a lot and probably make you want to join the full program because it'd be so good, and three, I know a lot of you guys probably won't even take use of this anyways because a lot of you don't even really want to take practice tests. So that's why I'm doing it. Anybody who joins in the free trial, I'll give it to them. Just go in here, go into the community, and all you'd have to do is find my profile here, John Hogirl, and just send me a DM. You'll see something here like send a DM, and you can let me know, hey, I want to get you to review my practice tests, and I'll go ahead and do it. All right, guys, hope this helps. I think you'll really enjoy this video. Let's get into it. Okay, so 1330 on this practice test, obviously a little bit lower than you're hoping for, but I will say there was some pretty good stuff on this test, and also I definitely noticed some very clear things you can pretty easily improve on, I think, for the next one as well. Let's go over the main things I have in each of these sections. So first of all, with reading and writing, biggest thing I definitely noticed was in the grammar, there are definitely some pretty, I would say bad grammar misses here. When I say bad, I mean like these are grammar misses I feel like you really have the ability to get through pretty easily. So missing them was like definitely the top priority for how to improve your score here. Specifically, I noticed one question which you notice as well with a verb, with the verb including, and specifically main verbs, and then also a question with modifiers, which is something I think, yeah, definitely you should be able to get as well. And then a couple things with however. However is definitely the hardest of these, so bit more reasonable to miss that thing. But yeah, all these things, I think you really just should continue on with the grammar practice and try to root out these mistakes. And also when you're going through grammar questions, I've said this many times already, but like definitely make sure that you're approaching them systematically. Make sure you're never in the situation where you're just going off of vibes. Always, like, you know, when you're looking at a question, think to yourself, what rule would this actually apply to? Like this would have probably solved all of the problems really for these things. But I'll get to some of those specific questions in a second. Next thing here, process of elimination. So for the passage question specifically, I noticed that as you're going through them, let me just see if I can find an example just to make this a bit simpler. So like for this, for example, you were most of the time just choosing the right answer and just going on. And that's okay. That's not the worst thing to be doing. And you probably are doing these pretty well for the most part. But I would really suggest to instead take the approach of every single time you do a passage question, eliminate all the incorrect ones and just go for whatever one is left. This is not just like some kind of style or formatting thing. Actually, the reason why I suggest this is because this is going to get you more thinking about how to be viewing passage questions in the right way. It might help you avoid some of these mistakes as well. Because as I've said many times on like different videos, it's not really the case that like, you know, you're rating each question or each choice, and each one has like, you know, this is 6 out of 10 choice, this is 7 out of 10 choice, this is 8 out of 10 choice, and this is 10 out of 10. So I should go for D, which is 10 out of 10. No, it's more the case when you're going through these passage questions where it's like, okay, there's something really bad with B, there's something really bad with C, and there's something really bad with D. I just have to go for A because that's the only one that's not something really bad there. There's not anything here that is directly not supported by the passage. And so eliminating the choices will get you more focused on that. So next time you go through a passage question, I would suggest like try to actually just like eliminate every single wrong one and just go for the right one. So actually strike through it in Onico, and that should help a lot with you identifying these kind of things. And yeah, that's the thing I noticed on a lot of these passage questions. Third thing I have here, on the grammar specifically, I noticed for some of these, the ones where you were pretty confident, or I guess a few of them maybe you're a little bit less confident, you were rechecking the answer a little bit, like you chose the answer, but then you kept looking at the problem for a bit before moving on. For reading, obviously you were kind of low on time and you use that time on the student notes, which I'll get to in a second. So really try not to do that. Like try to just like go for the grammar, pick it, and just move on immediately to the next question. It may feel a bit wrong, but hopefully if you can also improve your skill with grammar, this will feel not that bad to do. And you're just doing it so we can save some extra time, so we can spend more time on those passage questions and everything. So try to avoid this if you can. Fourth thing, make predictions on command of evidence questions. So there's one really important command of evidence question, which I have here with the graph. even on a question like this, make a prediction before you look at the choices. I know you may not be able to make a very good prediction, but I think it really would help. And I would guess that this is probably the biggest reason why you missed a question like this. So make sure you're always making predictions on command of evidence questions. And I don't have it listed here, but honestly, still make predictions on every question as well, like passage questions, transitions, vocab as well. Always try to make predictions on these questions because that's a big thing that might be hurting you because maybe you're misunderstanding some of these passages and not just because you're not making predictions, you don't notice it until you actually choose the answer. Make sure you do that. I can't see if you are doing that because obviously I can't see inside of your brain and we didn't have audio on for this one. And even if I did, it wouldn't really be that useful because you're not going to be talking on the actual SAT, obviously. So yeah, just make sure you're doing that if you are not already. Like, make sure you have a solid idea before you even look at the choices. What do you think the correct answer is? And especially on command evidence as well. Final thing is too much time on student notes. I'm sure you noticed this as well. You pretty much spend like all your time checking on just one student notes question on both modules. I think the goal here should instead be to try to improve on student notes, improve your understanding and your ability to select the right answer so you don't even have to spend as much time at the end of the test. And if you are in a situation where you feel like you're unsure about the student notes question, spend a little bit of time, yes. But I've noticed on these questions, it's likely not going to be the case that just looking at them more is going to help you too crazy much. Like if you've already looked at them a decent amount, it's probably not going to be the case that spending like 3 extra minutes on one student notes question is going to be the thing to help you. Instead, it would have been better to use this time on stuff like checking grammar so you could have avoided those grammar mistakes in the test. So try to avoid spending all this extra time on those questions. So that's pretty good. I'm going to go through some of the major questions in a second on here as well. Here's some of the questions that you specifically missed on here. So this is definitely one you really should try to improve. Not sure exactly what it was that caused you to miss this one, but whatever it was, really try to avoid it for the next time. So the thing here is we have this sentence and it already has a main verb, helped. You know it is a main verb because it is obviously the main thing of the sentence. It says echoes helped the poems feel both modern and archaic at once. The main action is that these echoes are doing the helping. So main verb there also just does not begin with to or that. It also does not end in ing. So yeah, this is definitely the main verb of the sentence. So you know for sure that you're going to have to go for a non-main verb for this thing. So definitely you know it cannot be B and cannot be C. It has to be either A or D. I was actually a little bit unsure whether it be A or D. Typically, you don't have 2 non-main verb choices, but I think definitely just in terms of the flow, A feels a lot better than that include. So just kind of flows better. So I would say going for A here definitely makes the most sense. But the main verb thing is really something you should try to root out because this is a very clear thing. This could, basically shows for sure that this question has to be A, or I guess arguably D, but pretty much has to be A. So definitely make sure that you improve a bit on this. Modifiers thing here, I think this is also one where like definitely, I don't want to criticize you, but like definitely I think you had the ability to get this one right for sure, 100%. So spun into fiber and test for strength, you have to choose whatever it was that was that got spun into fibers, basically. So the supervisor, obviously, they're not spun into fibers. That probably would be pretty painful. Colac is not spun into fibers. Again, painful. The strength test, that looks, I guess, appetizing, you could say. But again, those things are not being spun into fibers. In actuality, the only thing being spun into fibers is the fibers themselves. Kind of a weird way of writing that. But yes, it is the fibers that are being spun. And that, therefore, would be the answer to the question. So just have to keep that in mind. And so feels not the best, but definitely based off of modifiers, this would definitely have to be the right answer. Now onto the however thing. So for this one, first of all, you really have to pay attention to the independent dependent clauses thing. So it says one editor of a 19th century diary kept the original spellings word that updating them or erase evidence of the writer's regional background. You will notice that this thing after the blank is a dependent clause just because it has no subject to it. We don't know who is worrying that they would erase evidence. So therefore it has to be dependent clause. So it cannot have a semicolon. So that cannot be it and that cannot be. It cannot use a semicolon because no independent separation here. And so whenever you have, however, you have to have both a comma before and after it, or it could be a semicolon if it was in that situation. So therefore we know it has to be C for this one. So always pay attention to that. They can show this up. And I honestly would not be surprised if this shows up on your next SAT because the SAT writers are loving to add these kinds of extra things with like, however, sometimes use a comma, sometimes not. So definitely try to pay attention to that. And then we have here a much more fair mistake, I would say. We have this colon and then this with semicolon. You do go for the colon here just because it just explains after it what was essentially promised in the first thing. I said this thing in my recent YouTube video on the SAT Gamify channel. It's like when you have a colon, it's like you have a promise on the left side and then an explanation or a fulfillment of that promise on the right. So for this one here, it says, three transitions are essential in the workshop. So promise, there are three transitions that are essential. Then delivery is smash cut, match cut, and cross dissolve. Those are the different things that are in the transition list. So therefore, we have to use colon for this. So to always just remember, if there's any kind of extension at all, any kind of explanation you could argue, it is going to be the colon. The SAT writer is not trying to trick you here. It is just going to be that if there is kind of an extension after it. Okay, on to some other stuff here. So vocab, this I don't really have as important. Vocab's always going to be a bit of a struggle here, but just a few thoughts, I guess, on some of these that I thought I might as well point out. So for this one here, we talked about projections that are not really accurate, essentially not really the best. So we have to choose something saying that they're basically lying. They're basically not true. Equivocal, that means that could be okay, but equivocal is more along the lines of like it could go either way. Like it could be good, it could be bad, whatever. Unequivocal would mean like you're absolute, for sure. So equivocal kind of works here, but definitely if we're really trying to go for the best, specious really means like you're lying, like you're not right, something along those lines. So specious is a bit better than equivocal here. I notice equivocal does appear in many questions, even on official SATs, so definitely a good word to just understand. Then this one here, I would guess that this would be a comprehension mistake because I assume you probably know what skepticism means. So for this one here, they say they reveal dark streaks or appear to flow seasonally, lending blank to the hypothesis that the water source exists. So basically, they're saying here that it lends certainty, it lends support for this hypothesis. Like it supports it, makes it more strong, the hypothesis. So we're trying to find a choice that says more strong, it says something about supporting a certain thing. Skepticism would be, literally the exact opposite. It would be the idea that you get less confident, less sure about the hypothesis. So that would definitely not be it. Then with these other three ones, I assume you probably do not know what credence means. I kind of don't even really know what it means myself. I'm just kind of using based off of how other people have used that word before. So credence, it basically means support, I'm pretty sure. So you'd have to go for this for the answer. But I will just say, even if you don't know what credence means, I think it is still definitely fair to go for credence as the right answer here if you know it's not skepticism, because urgency, not saying anything about it like a time, like, we have to get to Mars right now, like Elon has got to get in the rocket right now. No, we're not having any urgency. And an opposition, again, the exact opposite, no pun intended, for what we're trying to find here. So credence is kind of just like what you have to go for. Always on these vocab questions, if it's great. We would love it if every single time we just knew the right answer for sure. But oftentimes it's more going to be the case that you just have to eliminate all the wrong ones and just go for whatever is left. So keep that in mind. Student notes here. I mean, unfortunate miss considering you spent a bunch of time on this question, but I'm sure you realize now. So they're asking what the practical recommendation supported with a key result is. This one is strong here for D, but it says the restored watershed had 12% lower peak on average. But in actuality, it is specifically during storms with more than 50 millimeters of rain per day. So that is actually like a really important information. Like this would be saying basically, I think here that all restored watersheds are doing that. Actually, I didn't even really look at it too well, but like one restored, yeah. Okay, yeah. So it would be saying that all restored watersheds are like that. So that really would not be correct. Like if you think about the restored watersheds, maybe there's like, let me just think of like a small amount. Like maybe there's 3 where this would be the case, but then there's 2 that are not within this 50 millimeter threshold. So that would not be the case. So you can't just go for this. It would just like actually not be correct based off the notes. So just a small misreading of the notes there. Make sure to try to avoid that. If you're between 2 choices like this, just choose the one that's more accurate, obviously. So that's why we get C as the answer. Okay, then definitely a rough miss here for the command of evidence thing. We have here, we're talking about time periods and the tools of Obsidian. And they're basically trying to say here that it starts like very separated apart, but then eventually gets to a closer thing in the middle. This is where I say the predictions I think would have helped you, because I think it's pretty obvious here. Like, they're going apart at the beginning and then they get closer to the middle as time goes on. So I think that's definitely, what we're trying to look for. That's what I think of when I looked at this one for the first time. And so then we look at this thing, we can just see here the increased substantially before that and change a little after that. And then they were percentages are nearly the same. So pretty works. It just describes how it changes at first, and it says nearly the same at the end. That would work for this thing at the end. Then this one, they both have similar percentages, but they remain far higher than the thing. So it's not saying that one is like definitely so much higher than the other one at the end. Like this is like maybe slightly higher than it, not really that much at all. What we're really trying to say here is that they're both are getting closer to it at the end. So you kind of went for a small detail here for the thing. What we really want is the overall idea of the differences and the connections between these two things on the graph. 2 more here. So we have this one here about the Mississippi Freedom Democrat Party in 1964. And so they did not want to make 2 of their delegates at large because it would have legitimized a all-white official delegation. So what I basically understand this as saying is that there were 2 people who I guess were probably black, and they were wanting to include them in the full delegation, so like they would be included in the full thing, but they want to make them at-large delegates, which I assume means some kind of separate thing. So kind of be segregating the delegation, like removing those people from the thing. So that would kind of just reinforce racist ideas. So they wanted to keep it in instead. But afterwards, they did decide that they wanted to amend some of the rules and try to improve the system to prevent these kinds of racist changes from happening in the future. And so when we look at these choices, I think the elimination, again, really would have helped here to identify clear things that just can't be the right answer. This one would be wrong because it says focus its post-convention efforts on replacing the delegation. It says not the National Party's rules. They actually are caring a lot about the rules. They're literally trying to change the rules so they can have a more better outcome in the future. So they do care about the rules. So saying not the National Party's rules would be an incorrect part of this. So we would have to eliminate C. Instead, they saw it as a token concession, and they wanted to press for rule changes that would prevent stuff like this from happening in the future. And then just finally here, a transition one. I wasn't sure whether to include this, but I thought I might as well throw it in here. So in this part right before the blank, they basically provide an explanation of the physics and stuff behind this certain phenomenon. And then they say battery with high energy density may be unable to provide the brief intense output that the thing requires. So basically they provide a physics thing and then they say the result of the physics thing. The result is that this is the case. So consequently we're here, it's very cause and effect with what it's saying. I know, for example, it may feel right because you're saying you're a battery with high energy density. It sounds like you're providing a specific example of the thing. But for example is more used if they list a group of different things and then they say one specific thing. Like if they said there were many different batteries that showed interesting characteristics, and then for example, one of them was this, that did this, etc. things. That's not what they're saying here. They're just saying a physics idea, and then here's what that physics idea is causing. Hopefully that makes sense. I can give some more examples if you want. Okay, a bunch of time there on the reading. Sorry about that, all of that. But now we have math, so it should not be as bad. So a couple of big things here for math. First of all, I would also kind of extend the idea that I said here on grammar of not rechecking. You did a pretty good job on this for most questions. I saw, you pretty much just select them, moved on. But yeah, try to avoid this a little bit more if you can. There are a few questions where it seemed like you click the right answer, and then we're just looking at it a few times again before you went on to the next one. A good example of this that I guess I sometimes tell students, okay, I don't think I've ever told anybody this before, but I remember I used to do debates in high school and college, and one time when I was doing a debate, I kept doing this thing where I kept giving an underview of what I was saying. So I'd be like, I make some like long points and everything, and then I'd say, in summary, that point was, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the judge would tell me after the debates, they're like, hey, don't do that because you already made your point. Like, you don't have to relitigate the point again. You've already said the thing. So that's kind of how I view this. Like, you've already chosen the right answer. You don't have to try to convince yourself of it again. Like you're in there. And if you don't do this, you will probably have more time at the end of the test to check your answers and try to determine if there is a better way you could do it. So it's better to not do that. Second thing here, very small thing, but I thought I should mention this again because I've noticed you were struggling with it before in previous calls we did. Use Desmos for these equivalent expressions problems. So for example, this one here, I didn't see you use Desmos at all, so don't assume you did. I think you just kind of calculated on your own. I think honestly, it would be maybe at least slightly faster to just write this out in Desmos, use the regression sign. So you have this being equal to that and it gives you actual numbers, and then just test out each of these things for it. I'm just guessing that probably it's going to be a lot easier and have a less likelihood of you making mistakes than if you don't do this. So do that and just make sure that you switch over to using this method when you're solving a problem like this. Third thing, small thing here, but do check module 1. I did notice, I assume this for the sake of a practice test, but like I noticed you kind of skipped at when you had like 60 seconds left on the clock. Obviously, you can't do too much for 60 seconds, but if you made a small mistake on like one of the easy questions at the beginning of the module, it would really, really hurt your score badly. So you do want to avoid that. So definitely check if you can. Fourth, I can't say for sure if you're doing this, obviously, because, I can't see your paper, I can't see your face or anything, but write down the information when you get to these complicated problems. So for example, if you see a problem like this, or if you see it like this, actually write down on a piece of paper before you solve the problem, like, okay, what is all the different information we're having here? So you know what you're dealing with. This makes it so much simpler to actually solve the problem, and I'll give an example of it as we do some of these in a second here. So write down the information before solving. You can do it on a piece of paper if you want, and actually that's pretty much the only option. So yeah, I guess you could write it in Desmos as well if you want to, like just write like numbers like plus 20 and that kind of stuff. But yeah, write down the information before solving complex problems. Finally here, skip when you honestly can tell that you don't know the strategy for solving the question. I didn't notice this too many times on the test, but there was at least a few questions. Like, for example, I felt like this probably was the case for this one. It seemed like you were trying to solve it, but you didn't really have too solid of a understanding of it, or like you weren't super good with it. I would say just skip this one and come back to it. Like, you probably could have figured this one out, maybe, but like it's complicated. I could tell that you weren't really getting this too well. So whenever you see a very complex question on a math test and you know you're probably going to have to, maybe you could figure it out, but it's going to take a decent amount of work, just go ahead and skip it. It's really not worth it. Just come back to it later. You're probably not going to have like an Oppenheimer moment and figure it out suddenly on the test. That being said, a few things here for the stuff. So for these question, kind of a weird thing here. I got to be honest, kind of a weird way of doing it, but definitely a fair question to ask, I would say. So we have this, and we basically have all these different sides being equal to each other in these two triangles. So the first thing I definitely notice is that this would have to definitely be 40 degrees as well, just per the thing where if you have a crisscross, you automatically know that that is 40. So that kind of stuff there. Really fair. But then the next thing you might notice is that with also basically that rule, you would know that this thing has to be 140 degrees, and this thing would also have to be 140 degrees in order to make the thing altogether add up to 360. And because of this rule where they're on opposite sides. So the thing with that you may notice now is now you actually have similar triangles here. So kind of a weird thing. You maybe did not realize that first. But yes, if we look at it here now, I guess I can even go ahead and write it. It might take a second because this is a weird similar triangle. But okay, this is P, and this is C, and this is B. And then if we have the other one, I'd imagine here like you basically flip it on the other side. So like take it, just like flip it off like through, to your face and then like into the page. Hopefully that makes sense. You would have something basically like D and then A here. So these two triangles would be similar. We know it's similar because they have the same angle measurement in the middle and then the same side measurements on either side. So side, angle, side similarity here. So therefore, we can pretty much just easily figure out everything else here. 30 degrees, if that is there, then it would also end up having to be the case over on this, being 30 degrees there. And then to get the other 70 degrees, we need to get for 100 to be the answer. We can also just notice the fact here that this is an isosceles triangle, the 40 degrees one over here, the small one. We have same side here, same side here. That means that these angle measurements down here must also be the exact same. So if it has to add up to 180 degrees, we know this has to be 70, and then this also has to be 70 degrees. So 70 there, and then 30 over here adds up to 100. So we go for 100 for the answer. So when you see these problems, you're always just trying to think to yourself, what are all the different things I could theoretically do? How could I piece together all this information to solve the problem? And usually it's a lot simpler than this, but yeah, sometimes you will have to use stuff like similar triangles to get it to work when you have information like the stuff given here. Next one here, dataset has 9 integers. The median is 8, the mean is 12, and minimum possible value. So this is the kind of thing where you maybe have not thought about a problem like this before. This is kind of a rarer problem, but now that I'm going to show it to you, I think you probably would have a better look at it the next time you solve a problem like this. So 9 integers and the median is 8. So basically what we're saying here is that the middle value must be 8, and then we have 5 things on this side, or actually not 5 things, 4 things on that side, and then 4 things on this side. And this is where I'm actually going to go ahead and pull out Desmos, because what we can do here is write this very important equation. You should know this if you have not used this before. But basically, if you have the sum, let me say S for sum, of a data set at the top and divide it by the amount that's in the data set and the amount of numbers, so that'd be 9 for this one, that would have to equal the mean of the data set. That's just how it works. And it should make sense logically as well. This is how you calculate the mean. The sum divided by the amount equals the mean. So yes, the sum of this data set must be 108 for the total things. So we know that it has to add up to 108. And then we're trying to see what is the minimum value for the range. So think about what this is really saying. What we would try to do to minimize this is say, how can we get the biggest numbers as possible over here and the smallest numbers as possible over here? If they are as big as possible over here, that means we could literally just put 8 and then 8 and then 8 and then 8. Hopefully that makes sense. It was kind of confusing when I was thinking about it for the first time as well. But if we had it like less than 8, if we had like 1, 2, 3, 4, then we're going to be expanding the range because that's going to make it bigger, the numbers we would have to put over here, and the difference between them is going to be even bigger. Like if we do 17 minus 1, obviously that's going to be more than 17 minus 8. So that is how we're getting this. It also cannot be greater than 8, obviously, because the median is 8. It can't be greater than that. Otherwise, it'd be put on the opposite side of the 8. So yes, those can just all be 8. And then we just think to ourselves, what is essentially the minimum thing we can put on the outside to make this all work? So the way I would just do this is just write here A and then make a list of numbers. So we have 8, 8, 8, 8, 8. And then would just basically try out numbers on the other side. Maybe not the best way I could be doing this problem, but I might as well just try it out. So I could just like try here 999 and then see here mean of A. Okay, that's not even close. We're trying to get to 12. So let's go a few numbers up. Like, I guess we basically need at least 12 here for it. Otherwise, we know it's definitely not going to work. So let's say like 13, 13, 13, 13. Okay, still not close enough. The 8s are really weighing it down. 14, 14, 14, 14. Okay, let me just skip to 16, 16, 16, 16. Okay, we're closing in on it. So yes, 17, 17, 17, 17. Yes, so 12. Again, I do not want to make any of these numbers greater than this. I don't want to like choose like this one to be like 20 and then this one to be going down to like 10 because then we have a larger range. So has to be 17, it has to be exactly 12. If we make it even a bit bigger than that, if we make it 18 instead, it gets to the point where it would now be 12 greater than that. Even if I make all of these 17 and just make that last one 18, like still slightly bigger than 12. So that is why it has to be 9, because if we do 17 minus 8, that gives us 9. So tricky one there for sure. I have this one over here with the container holding V liters of a certain solution. This is basically where I would want to write down some information. So we basically have here at the beginning, it has like 20% of the thing, and then they're removing 10 of the entire solution and then adding 10 of a 5-liter salt solution, and then they just add 5 liters of water. So that's the overall thing. And then we get at the end 0.15 for salt. What we have to do at this point is basically think to ourselves, what can we make as variables and what should we just write down? We have here V liters, and then the rest of it, we just kind of know 10 liters of this solution, 10 liters of that solution. There's no ambiguity here. There's only ambiguity for the first one. So I actually just had Claude show a brief example of how this looks just to make it a bit simpler. So 0.2 V minus 0.2 times 10, because we already know that, plus 0.05 times 10 plus 0.5 there, because it would just be water that doesn't add anything to it. So this would be the total amount of the, what is it? The salt, I think. Yeah, salt. And this would be just the total solution in general. So minus 10 plus 10 plus 5. And that gives you 0.1. For a lot of these, you kind of solve it by making this fraction up here and just setting it equal to the total thing. So 15% salt, you say 0.15 on this side and just have all the salt at the top and then the total thing at the bottom. That's a common thing I see in a decent amount of these. So that's how you can solve something like that. Final thing here, I think this actually, I would assume this was just like a careless mistake actually, because it seems like you did get the right answer. So yeah, you correctly identified here that according to the, okay, well, yeah, I'll just break it down here. So we have this triangle here, and let's say use the Pythagorean theorem on it. So that plus that, and then c squared. So we get 13 for this. And then according to the rules of altitudes, 12 times 5 divided by 13, that'd be 4.6. So that would be that. And then you can go ahead and use the Pythagorean theorem on the other ones and see what they have to be. So we could say here 4.6 squared plus b squared tilde 12 squared, and they'll get like 11 here, and then that's pretty close to, yeah, pretty much the same as A. So yeah, pretty obvious what happened here. It looks like you just chose B, which would be what the altitude itself would equal to, like 4.6. And so, yeah, so definitely a careless mistake there, but I think it also could have been maybe you just ran out of time on this. I can't remember exactly what happened in the test. So if that was the case, it's like worth pointing out here that this is where the time stuff that I say up here does come into play, because it's like, if you don't recheck as much, or like if you use Desmos for that equivalent expressions question, that may have been in module 1, so maybe that actually wouldn't have affected it. But at least also, yeah, if you skip when you don't know the actual answer, that kind of stuff could have opened up the time that you needed to identify this careless mistake here and drop at least one of these questions that you got wrong. So always remember, everything is not in a vacuum. Everything is related to other stuff. So that's the main stuff here. Regardless, though, I will say definitely a pretty good test overall. You made a lot of good stuff with the Desmos in the math section for the reading and writing. All of the grammar stuff besides what I said was really good. And you also made a lot of really good decisions for the passage questions as well that I did not have here. Obviously, we are only looking at the mistakes. It's not showing all the correct answers that you actually did get as well. Let me know if you have any other questions on this, and we can definitely talk about it more next time that we talk in person. All right, remember again, if you want one of these for yourself, just check the link in the description below. 7-day free trial. You can get one for yourself in the first week. Thanks so much again, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Good luck on the SAT, and make sure to always stay Gucci.